back, or just about back. We'll start the recording again. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, I'll just give everybody just a moment for others to return. Hopefully you'll have some refreshments and a bit of a stretch. Okay, right, I will move us on then. So we are now going to take item number 6. So this is our finance assurance report month 10, and I will hand over to Heleth for this item, please.
Thank you, Sarah. So at the previous board meeting, we'd received confirmation of an increased brokerage cap of 49.7 million. As you can see in month 10, the position year to date is 58.3 million deficit, but with a forecast year-end position of 45.5 million. So that's a 4.2 million improvement on that brokerage cap, and we're seeing that slight improvement trajectory through to month 11 as well. The number and likelihood of further risk impact in this position is significantly reduced at this time of year, given that we're now towards the end of March. So the biggest assumption continues to be the delivery of a balanced position for adult social care. There are ongoing conversations happening with the council to mitigate this, and there's a drawdown that we need to do against the transformation fund. And then we need a partnership agreement for the remaining. We are confident that we will come to a settlement that will allow us to deliver on our brokerage commitment. Some of the key areas to note: the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership. There's been a small deteriorating in the adult social care forecast, but overall an improvement in the partnership. So that's nearly £1 million improvement across the other areas of community, primary care and mental health between them. The acute position has deteriorated in its forecast by around £1 million, and again that's split reasonably equally across all the different areas. And then within support services, there is around a £4 million improvement, which is contributing to the overall improvement position. And that's just due to some release of reserves and an improvement within estates as well, with reduced payments for the PFI. Argyll and Bute's also showing a small improvement of 150,000, and we continue to expect that Argyll and Bute will deliver a break-even position by the end of the year. If you look at the cost reductions, we are still driving through the work streams, and they will continue into next year as well with some additions. The plan delivery for 24-25 has increased from 22.8 million in the last report to the board up to 25.5 million. So as we said, we are still continuing to drive those improvements and realising some of those. From a capital position, there's still a small way to go to spend the full capital allocation this year. And together with some additional capital allocations that we've managed to secure from Scottish Government, and we are forecasting and confident that we will deliver that and spend that full capital allowance this year. Then I just want to take an opportunity to give a brief verbal update of the budget position for 25-26. At the last board meeting, I gave an update of the budget settlement shared within the budget in December. This has now been worked through with some further information that we've received over the past months, and a plan was submitted to Scottish Government last week, and that's had an opening position of a deficit of 115.6 million after taking into account a non-recurrent funding allocation that we've received of 16.7 million. And after application of further actions and delivery of the 3% savings expectation, we've submitted a plan that delivers 55.723 million deficit into next year. We're proposing to bring the detail of that plan to the next board, so I wasn't going to talk too much about things like the national insurance contribution, as Jerry mentioned earlier, but we're still working through some of that detail. We have received confirmation from the health side that we will get cover for 60% of our directly employed staff. And there's, as Jerry mentioned, there's not been any confirmation for any of our providers that are independent sector providers. Adult social care, we've also had confirmation that there will be contribution in the Highland partnership for adult social for national insurance, apologies, but we're still working through the detail of that. The council have asked us for some information regarding to our directly employed staff and contractors, etc. So at the moment, for prudency, we've put in all the allocations and expenditure for the health side, and within the adult social care, we've put the expenditure in, but we haven't yet put anything in there against the income, but we are expecting something. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Heleth. And just sorry, there was a lot there. Just in that last bit about submitting those plans to Scottish Government. I know that's been somewhat iterative. Are we expecting further feedback from them, or are we at a kind of an agreed position?
Yeah, sorry, I should have said that. So that's why we didn't bring the detail to this board, because we expect to have some feedback around that plan. We've not received that yet. We've had just some small accuracy feedbacks just about where numbers should sit in templates, but we've not had anything back around the actual figures and where we're landing. We do have a quick catch up with Scottish Government next week, so we're hoping to get at least some informal feedback at that point. But we'll await, and hopefully we'll have further information around that feedback and national insurance contributions and budgets and those kind of things from the council in preparation for the May meeting. So hopefully we'll have more detail for them as well.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, I will open up questions, comments. I possibly have another one then. So again, I know we can't answer this yet, but I'm just mindful of conversations that we had earlier on today as well about kind of working, across boards working together differently. But I know we don't know exactly what that will look like yet, and that will influence kind of how we do this. But I think I'm mindful that one of the recommendations in that paper was about the board getting assurance that we are working in that collaborative way as we've been asked to do. And I suppose I'm interested in the future in how that might look from a financial perspective as well. If the money is going to flow in a different way, how we might report on that. I know we can't answer that now, but it's just something that I'm mindful of. And I don't know, Heleth, have there been any conversations amongst the directors of finance around what that might look like in the future?
Not really at the moment. We do have a directors of finance meeting in person this week, so there might be more feedback following that meeting and conversations. My personal view is that we are way overdue a review of the SLA process, and the funding mechanism for that SLA process isn't fit for purpose for a collaborative world and the way that we need to work going forwards. So that would be my ask as Scottish Government, which I have made. As you're probably aware, the replacement for Richard McCallum is out to advert at the moment. So I'm hoping that would be maybe a remit of that new post holder as they come in, is around how we enable that collaborative working through the financial flows.
Okay, we shall watch this space. Alex, I'll bring you in, please.
Yeah, just to build on that a little bit, Sarah, is the intention, and perhaps Kristen can join in this as well, is there going to be an intention in the ADP of putting something in about collaboration and how we do that? Or is that, A, is it too high level, or B, is it just too early for that and we need to wait a year or so out? How do you think we should plan that?
I can come in to start with. Kristen might want to join later, but there's always been cross-boundary flows. There's always been activity that we've been taking across boards, and we've done that on a board-by-board basis. And and we've got SLAs, etc., that support that. Within the planned care submission, we have allowed in there activity that would allow for other boards to provide to receive some of that activity. So I think that's probably the place that we're doing it at the moment, is through additionality rather than within our current plans. But that might evolve as we move through this world. It's all quite new at the moment, Alex, so we're probably not quite that refined, but Kristen might want to come in and add to that.
Yeah, just on that point, and it was mentioned earlier as well that, you know, the ADP process has been continuing, but then whilst we've been doing that, we've had the urgent and scheduled care return to go in the planned care. So it's not been in that kind of linear way. So our ADP went away last week to the government. We're going to receive feedback from them, and then absolutely we're going to have to tweak anything within that we have changed. And so we do know that we are offering orthopaedics out, you know, nationally, and yet we're going to be requiring other specialties help elsewhere, like vascular, gynecology, things like that. So I think we'll do a small nod to it within it, just that's within the plan, but there'll not be anything more concrete than that at this stage, just because it's all quite hot off the press at the moment. But where we do know that we are able to offer out nationally, like the orthopaedic sessions that we've got, we can put that in, certainly, yes.
Sorry, sticky mute button. Thank you, Kristen. I think that'd be helpful. Okay, any other questions or comments on the month 10 position? Okay, thank you, Heleth. Obviously, waiting to see what happens over the next short period, and we'll be bringing that back to the board when we have the feedback and more detail, and that'll be a good discussion to have at that point. So we are being offered limited assurance and asked to examine and consider the extent of that. So I think we have done that. That's fine. I shall move us on to the next one for you, Heleth. So this is our opening offer for the Argyll and Bute Integration Joint Board.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. I'm not sure there's much more I can really add to that, other than it's followed the same process that we've undertaken annually. So we're providing the full NRAC share to Argyll and Bute, and it does take into consideration all the additional allocations and adjustments that we've had as well. There's obviously some risk within there that some of the expected allocations don't come through, etc. But we just work through that throughout the year, as always, with Argyll and Bute. So it's been worked on in collaboration, so the teams have worked together on this offer, so it should be completely expected by Argyll and Bute as well, and agreed.
Oh, perfect. Evan, I was going to invite you in and you put your hand up anyway. Evan?
Just to echo Helen's comments, this is expected, and I really appreciate the collaborative approach and the kind of consistent engagement between the teams. It's really welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. No, it is good to hear about that approach. And I'm making a bit of an assumption, or I've possibly skimmed over it, but the kind of the outstanding in-year allocations that might come is the intention to pass those through on the NRAC basis the same way we have done with all of this. So that will follow that kind of pattern.
Yeah, there are some allocations that sit outside of that. They're not subject to NRAC. They're different, but they're very, very small in numbers, and we always have the conversation on both sides first. But otherwise, yes, they get passed through in an NRAC.
Okay, that's helpful. Jerry.
Thank you, Sarah. Helen, this got into my brain last night because I was actually looking at the later paper on the review of the scheme of integration. And the question I had going around my brain, and it maybe I'll be totally nonsense and tell me if it is I'm assuming the 28.54% NRAC share is calculated by Scottish Government on the Argyll and Bute share of the population as adjusted for the various factors. La-di-da-di-da-di-da. And I'm absolutely fine with that. I suppose my question is, what is the relationship between that share of the population and those services which are actually delegated?
So given that all services are delegated to Argyll and Bute, it's a direct relationship. So that's why we give the NRAC, is because there's nothing that sits outside the delegation.
That's the answer. If all services are delegated, that's the answer. Thank you.
Evan?
It is a complicated area, but it's worth just adding that there's then a transfer of money back. Well, not a transfer, and kind of in principle transfer of money back the way for various share of corporate services as well.
Sorry, I have a very reluctant mute button today. Thank you. That was helpful. So I think we can note that we haven't got any other questions. So sorry, we're being asked to approve the budget offer. That's important. And I suppose just to note, actually, it's really good to hear, as both Helen, yourself, and Evan have described, that collaborative approach to getting to this point. I think it's worth noting, because you know, I know that these things aren't always done so harmoniously. So hats off to everybody who's been part of that. I think that's really positive. Is everybody happy that we can approve that? Lovely. Oh, Emily?
Sorry, just a procedural question. I don't think it's going to be controversial, but those of us who sit on the IJB, are we okay to vote on this, or are we supposed to abstain?
Bizarrely, yes, you're okay to
okay. I just feel like I'm sitting on a fence at the moment, but that's fine.
No, it is a strange duality of board members who are also IJB members, and one of much discussion at national level. But no, you are allowed to. Yeah, thank you. Good question though. Okay, great. Right, that is approved. I'm going to take us on to item number 8, and thank you, Heleth, we have made up our time. So we are on to item number 8, and I'll invite Tim to speak to this one. So this is the paper we have around corporate parenting. So over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Chair. This paper is presented to update board members on the position regarding corporate parenting and the promise within both Highland and Argyll and Bute. It was written principally by Debbie Stewart, who is the Child Health Commissioner. I'm hoping that she's joining us in case of questions, but specific questions, but I can't be 100% sure. Corporate parenting, to some extent, has taken a little bit of a back seat for a variety of reasons in recent years. But it's important to recognise the crucial nature of the promise and the importance of addressing the needs of care experienced children and young people, and also people who are older who have had care experience and make up quite a significant part of the population. And it relates to the overall health and equalities agenda. It also links in with other parts of the work of the board, not just in terms of how we provide services and we secure services for people who are care experienced, whether the services that we directly provide or the ones that are often more frequently accessed, particularly those within primary care and from primary care independent contractors, where there are particular issues that may come up around younger people's vulnerability, movement movement across different parts of Highland and Argyll and Bute. There's also the role of the board as an anchor institution, looking at things like employability and job opportunities for those who are care experienced. The paper sets out the two different governance routes and governance setups within Highland, Argyll and Bute, and there's the plan for Highland, which is noted in one of the appendices. We had, I think a couple of years ago, the board improvement plan came and has been put into practice and largely implemented, but still needs to be refreshed, and a new plan set in train, which will be done for June, so that we'll be able to be clear what the particular tasks are for the board, how the board can recognise its responsibilities within corporate parenting and deliver through the corporate parenting board in Argyll and Bute and the Promise board within Highland. So I think there's an awful lot more that we need to do, but this paper sets out where we are and looks forward to the future. And so requests. It is a paper of information, but offers moderate assurance about how we are progressing with the corporate parenting agenda. And I see that Debbie has joined us, so she would be able to take specific questions which board members may have.
Thank you, Tim, and welcome, Debbie. It is great to have you here. I really enjoyed reading this report, and I felt it was really helpful and helped me to be cited on things that I don't think I had been or I needed more information on. So it was a really welcome paper. I think it was very informative and a really important one for us as our role as corporate parents. I'll open up for questions and comments. I realised that there was a lot in that paper, so I'm sure people will have things that they want to pick out. Karen, I'll come to you, please.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks for the paper, Tim. Really interesting, and I think given a lot of our conversation today has been around collaboration, mine is around the opportunities and how we explore the opportunities or take advantage of the opportunities of collaboration across Argyll and Bute and Highland, and how that, where are we looking for, and shared experiences and learning and resource sharing and all of those things that we've talked about, that Fiona started us talking about. And is that something that is happening in this space? Because it seems like it probably should be. Thanks.
Yeah, I think from the corporate parenting and promise point of view, Argyll and Bute and Highland are really quite separate. But I think we've got the opportunity as the board to do more. And I think there were certainly areas such as that common provision, and I particularly think about primary care that we can look at making progress, but also to pick up what's been said earlier on in the meeting, to look at it as a positive that we have people who have care experience, who are looking for employment, who are looking to improve their health, and how can we use their experience and their talents better to improve all our health. But I think Debbie wants to come in.
Yeah, I suppose an example would be a mention in the paper that Argyll and Bute have decided to extend their current corporate parenting plan for another year to take a more integrated approach, because there is a lot of overlap in relation to children's services plans, the Promise plan and corporate parenting plans. And very recently I shared the Promise plan with the chair of the corporate parenting board in Argyll and Bute, which they were very pleased to see an example from North Highland. And I would imagine that Argyll and Bute's experience of taking a much more integrated approach to planning that North Highland will be able to learn from as well. So there is an exchange in terms of sharing resources and learning. And although there's specific needs in each area, I think overall the outcomes we're trying to achieve are the same, basically.
Thanks, Debbie. I think that's a really good point, and it is really good to hear that there's that cross. I think that's a real opportunity. Jerry, I will bring you in next, please.
Thank you, Sarah, and my thanks to Tim and Debbie for the paper. And Tim and Debbie and I are in the very early stages of hopefully being able to have some discussions with each other in relation to this wider agenda. I asked a very specific question about something, but I suppose what I'm about to say probably is more of a personal reflection rather than anything. It's just, as a board member, I can't help but feel as if I feel very far removed from my role as a corporate parent. And if someone was to come in and challenge me on what are you doing in relation to your role as a corporate parent, I'm not sure I could adequately answer that question. And it may well just be me, and I'm happy to be told it's just me, and I need to do more. So this is why the paper is so useful. But I do feel as if we as a board should be more active in this space, and it's probably not a conversation for today, but I think it's something we do need to explore. So thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Jerry. I'll come in on that one, and then Debbie, I'll let you have some comments as well. I agree, and I think that's possibly why I enjoyed reading this report so much, because it felt like it was informing me of something that was really important for me to know. So I absolutely agree with that, and I mean, there's probably a range of reasons why that is the case for us. I think probably a part of that is to do with the two, although they are very different, the two models of integration that we have here in Highland. One where the lead agency for Children's in the North is obviously sits for the Highland Council, and in Argyll and Bute we have children, everything is integrated into the Argyll and Bute scheme. So for those two different reasons, I think that might be a part of why we are feeling that way. But I think that you're right, Jerry. I think that's something for us to think about. How do we, within the governance structures that we have, and without kind of duplicating, how do we make sure that we as corporate parents have the visibility that we need without doubling up on the governance? But Debbie, I don't know if you have a view on that you wanted to share.
Yes, well, one of the actions in the improvement plan is to organise training for board members every couple of years. Who Cares Scotland are funded to do that. That's certainly something we could look at for a future development session. I suppose my own suggestion would be, or what I would quite like to do, I know you're very, very busy, but do a development session on children's rights and include corporate parenting within that, alongside the promise, things like the UNCRC, and try and kind of cover those topics in a more integrated way. So that's certainly something we can organise for the future. And I can pick that up with you, Jerry, and anything that I can do to facilitate more understanding. There's also a number of events that happen throughout the year where corporate parents are invited along to speak and listen to care experienced children and young people. I attend some of them. I know that previous board members have also attended. So I think I need to make more of an effort to make sure that folk are aware of those, and if they would like to attend, that I'm able to organise that for them.
Thanks, Debbie. So actually, I think I would quite like to record an action here, and I'm feeling there are two strands to this. So I think there is a strand around kind of general awareness for us as corporate parents that could be picked up, as Debbie's described, through development and sharing of information, and making us more connected in that space. So I think that's one half of it. And then I think the other half is through a governance lens. So given the integration arrangements that we have now and will have in the future, recognising what we're looking at in North Highland, do we just need to take a step back and make sure that we as a board, as corporate parents, are getting the right kind of assurance from those governance structures? It's possible that that's fine, and that's all hunky-dory, but I think it would be quite good to do those two things together and check that we've got the governance structures and the awareness that we need as corporate parents. So I think if we can record that as an action, please, Nathan and Ruth, and we can take that offline, because I think that's a really important point. I will bring in Anne next, please.
Thanks, Sarah. So I do have a couple of questions, but if I could just say that I was lucky enough to attend one of the events that Deborah is referring to a while back now, and it was an event that was organised by certainly included care experienced young people from across the Highlands and Islands, and there's also a local group called Champs, and I would certainly, I have to say, urge people that to actually get out there and meet care experienced young people, that's the best possible way to understand more about their needs. They've produced a little video as well of what they expect from corporate parents, so that's always worth viewing as well. But certainly I just urge people to take advantage of those events that Deborah can put you in touch with, because that was certainly a really instructive experience, and putting that sort of lived experience together with any improvements that might come from a second look at our governance structures and things, I think would be really positive. But my question really, well, I suppose in a way it's related. I suspect from reading the plan, the answer to this is no, but I wondered if anybody would be able to comment in a little bit more detail in terms of whether we have the data that we need to know whether or not the actions that we're taking to improve the health of care experienced young people are actually working. How do we actually know whether their health's improving or not? And then secondly, for some time now, in terms of the data that we do get about North Highland and the children's plan, of which this is a part, there's been a decline in the number of health assessments that are being carried out when somebody becomes care experienced. And there was a reference in the narrative to a possible change in approach to carrying out these health assessments to make them more trauma aware. So I wondered if anybody could comment on what's actually happening with that redesign and how we expect that to improve our knowledge of the health status of young people when they first become care experienced. Thanks.
A couple of things in response to that. I think that there's not as much data as we would like to provide the level of insight into the kind of health needs of care experienced young people. I think there have been health needs assessments done in the past. We could potentially look at revisiting that. There's also within the promise, one of the working groups that's been established is about doing data differently. And essentially that's looking at how we incorporate experiential data. And we have information from those with care experience on what their experience is of receiving services. So that's kind of developing at the moment. You're right in that the proportion of health assessments conducted in a timely manner is not at a level that we would like it to be, and that's part of a new approach that Highland Council have said that they'll take in a meeting with Jane Park. I think it's tomorrow morning, to find out a bit more about that and how that's likely to work. But certainly I have routine meetings with Community Child Health and Highland Council and raise these issues within that forum and also through the Children's Services Board. But yeah, you're right that it's a key area for improvement, and I think we need to do better in how we track that and improve on it.
Anne, you want to come back in?
Well, it's good to hear that you're meeting Jane, Deborah. I wonder, I don't know what Jerry would feel about this, whether we could ask him to consider whether at some point, maybe in 6 months' time or something, through the Health and Social Care Committee, we ask for a very, for a specific update on that work around health assessments and data in relation to looked after children, so that we can have a look to see what the impact of that change in carrying out health assessments is. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, and Jerry's giving big thumbs up, so that's good. We'll take that as an action to bring that back to that committee. Okay, thank you. Alex, I'll bring you in, please.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'm a bit like Jerry. I feel like I don't know enough. I don't know anywhere near enough to be able to say that, I'm doing what I should be doing with corporate parenting. The bit, though, made me think about it. Been in a lot of JMCs where children's services give reports, talk about plans, etc. I can't remember them ever talking about corporate parenting and how that links. And I would have expected to hear that there. And it just isn't, it's just not talked about. I don't know why, but I think that's something that we need to think about incorporating and bringing it in terms of governance, etc. Because it's just, as I say, thinking on it now, it just isn't discussed at all, and it should be. So maybe that's something we need to bring up. Thanks.
Okay, I can pick that one up, Alex. So I think, because I was reflecting on that as well when I was reading through the report and looking at the governance structures, I suppose the one bit that was missing on the diagram was the JMC. And so I think what happens at the JMC is we talk about the elements as they're kind of in the different part, but we perhaps in the JMC it isn't explicitly talked about in terms of that corporate parenting responsibility. Now I'm about to hand over chair of the JMC back to a colleague in the council, and I do have a handover coming up with David, so I think I can pick that up as well, because I think that's that would be a helpful forum in which to remind ourselves of our corporate parenting duties. But Fiona, you wanted to come in as well?
Yeah, I think there's a wee bit of added complexity because I think, if I remember rightly, that the children's governance within Highland doesn't directly report into the JMC, although there is a reporting element, that there is a line of reporting, if I remember rightly, into the CPP in terms of the overall strategy for children's services. So I wonder that if you like, the equivalent visibility we might have of issues to do with adults aren't replicated in the JMC in the same way. But nonetheless, if we have an interest in a particular topic, I think there's nothing to stop us asking for it to be discussed in the JMC. And of course, beyond that, we are in now an active process of looking at the arrangements for integration in Highland, which also will include governance and reporting across the lifespan. So I think we've got a good opportunity, if we feel that there's topics that are actually critical to meeting improved outcomes for people. And I think children in this group would be very much at the heart of our values as a group, that we would absolutely want to ensure that we're meeting their holistic and integrated needs, but obviously having the assurance in particular of the health aspect of that. Then I think we've got a good opportunity in the forthcoming months to ensure that we think our arrangements for the future are going to keep our eyes on the absolute groups with the highest priority. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks. So to summarize it, I think what we're saying is that there is a lot of reporting and a lot of assurance, but what we just need to make sure is that we as board members, as corporate parents, have that right level of assurance and visibility, and that might just be lifting from where it sits already, but we will take that offline to have a look at it, because it's really important that we have that. And I think to Anne's point around the data, so another question I was going to ask, which Anne has articulated very well, is that, you know, it's great to see the huge amount of work on it, and it's just making sure that going forward we get the assurance that it's having the impact that we want it to have, and recognize that this is a, you know, it's a plan that spans a number of years, and things don't change overnight, but that'll be something for us to be mindful of as we move forward. Pam, I'll bring you in.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that point, and in line with Anne's question, then we should be able to articulate some of that performance and maybe pull it out more explicitly in the annual performance report that will be coming forward. So that might offer an opportunity to provide more information to the board through that mechanism.
Okay, that's good. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so we were being asked to note the update and take moderate assurance. People are happy with that. Excellent. Okay, so that takes us on to item number 9. I'll invite Boyd to speak to this item. This is our corporate risk register.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Board. It's the standard report in its format that you'll be familiar with, as to provide an overview extract from the NHS Highland Board risk register, and would give awareness of any risks that are being considered for closure or to be added. I don't think I have any listed for today, but the risk paper is derived from the governance committee structure, and it means that where risks appear here, they've come through a governance committee, such as the standard governance committees or the audit committee, etc. Risk itself as an overall system reports to the audit committee as a regular item there as well. And risk management is a key element of the board's internal controls for corporate governance, as highlighted in the Blueprint for Good Governance, and that continues in its developmental journey to comply with that publication. So therefore, I'll leave it for board members to ask any questions about individual risks and seek my executive colleagues' assistance with any replies to any questions that may arise. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Boyd. And it's helpful to see this all together. Obviously, people in the various committees will have seen bits of this in more detail through their own committee work, but it's good to see it in its entirety. Does anybody have any questions or observations that they want to make around the risk register? Emily, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Boyd. I think I just have a question around I guess from the risk system point of view, which is where sort of audit's responsibility comes in, how the different parts of the system use information to inform how the risk register looks. So I guess one recent example, we had an internal audit report on cybersecurity with quite a lot of fairly material issues raised, albeit excellent progress being made on those. Does something like that prompt a review of the cybersecurity risks on the risk register? I guess just like, how do we use information when we do identify issues in the organisation to almost test the theory that the risk register is complete and that it does have everything on it that it should have in the right materiality and format? I hope that makes sense.
That's maybe a question not about the board risk register, but about risk registers that sit below board level, is it?
Potentially, I guess, just to understand like how it's really just for me testing, like, are the right things being identified on the list? And the one way that you would test that is if, I guess, what you might describe as an issue arises in a certain area. How does that inform how we classify and look at the risks and how maybe the materiality that we ascribe to them?
Yeah, I think there's probably not a simple answer to that. It's probably quite complex in that it'll be one of those, it depends on what what you're looking at or what lens you require. In terms of the strategic level of risk that we have expressed here, it's the highest level ones that will are risks to our overall strategic intent and objectives and outcomes. In terms of the more operational risk registers that sit within the system, further down at level 2 and level 3, those will be much more local in focus. But there is a system where collation of risks informs risk at a higher level, and it so there is a sort of a communication up and down that line. And each area will have a slightly different version of how they would do that in terms of that translation of risks up and down through the board and its different levels. In terms of how the strategic risk register cybersecurity risks are developed, and that's probably one that's best answered by Ian Ross, head of eHealth, or perhaps David has a hand up. He may be able to assist with the specifics of that.
Well, we have a whole gang of people who want to assist. So I've got David, then Gareth, then Pam.
Yeah, thanks. I think we were getting there with the conversation, particularly related to the cybersecurity one that Emily mentioned. It's the same person who's involved in, and the same team who are involved in both the mitigations as well as assessment of risk as it goes through the process. And you'll see from the actions that we've got highlighted even within the risk report that is before you today, there are a number of national initiatives to which we then adopt. So it is a dynamic piece. I think it's fair to say that we would routinely review those, and probably on a quarterly basis in terms of that, but the actions are very much ongoing. So there is a direct link between the two aspects of assessment and of ongoing updates with regard to actions.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, David. Gareth?
Yeah, I think we've got some opportunities in the coming year, thinking about how we think about strategic risks, and as we refresh our thinking about board, the direction of the board and board strategy in the future. So that might be something we want to pick up in terms of wider board development discussions as well. So I think Boyd was describing more the operational elements, and there's also the element of what's going to impact on us strategically and be able to deliver our ambitions for the board.
Okay, good. And Pam, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of the operational risks then, within the the partnership and community services, we have a regular review of our level 2 and 3 risks. We've got a process that we have within our senior leadership team and our structure, but we also bring as part of our agenda to the Health and Social Care Committee. So should there be a risk there that the committee considered would need to be escalated as a strategic risk, then that mechanism is there as well. Thank you.
Okay, that's helpful. Emily, are you comfortable with that?
I think so. I think I would welcome Gareth's suggestion of maybe a future board development session looking at this in more depth, but that's not an urgent thing. It's just of interest. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. No, I agree. I think that would be good. Okay, I'm not seeing, do we have any other questions or comments on the risk register? Not seeing any other hands up. Okay, thank you, Boyd. So we were being, moderate assurance is being proposed, and we're being asked to note that update. Is everybody happy with that level of assurance? Yeah. Great. Okay, I'm going to move us on to item number 10. So this is our whistleblowing standards report for Q3, and I'd like to invite Gareth to speak, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this is the standard quarterly report covering the period, the third quarter from 1st of October to 31st of December. And we considered this at the Staff Governance Committee. Just the detail in the report. We've got one concern which was raised but was ineligible under the standards. One concern that's been raised but not progressed under the standards following discussion with the individual, but that has since been progressed into a formal investigation. And and we have another concern that's being discussed and in partnership, in sort of discussion with the individual, which at the moment is not progressing under the standards, but has was initially indicated they may wish to consider the standards, and we closed one case. We've had some INWO involvement with 2 completed cases to complete a further initial assessment of whether to investigate those further. There's more detail in the paper in relation to all of those. The main level of assurance remains at moderate, given that we have robust processes in place to actually undertake the investigations and report back on that, and they're more reliable in terms of the actual process itself. But meeting the 20-day working days is still it's going to continue to be a challenge. So maybe something we'll want to think about in terms of that assurance level in the future.
Okay, that's helpful. And I know this will have been discussed at staff governance, but just picking up on that last point there around that timescale being a challenge and how we think about that. I'm assuming that it is a challenge for all boards everywhere. We're not particularly different. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions and comments. Bert, please.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add to what Gareth said in relation to the report, other than just to say that the timescales are a challenge in every board area right across the country, and in fact it was a topic of conversation at a recent national meeting. But the timescales are what the timescales are at present in the national standards.
Okay, but that's helpful to understand that it's difficult for everybody and that we're not particularly different. Okay, that's good. Any other questions or comments on the Q3 whistleblowing report? No. Okay, so we were being asked to take moderate assurance, picking up that last point there, and note the content of the report. Are we happy with that? Yeah, okay, lovely. Gareth, you're on for a while for the next, for the foreseeable items. So over to you again, please. So this is item number 11, but this is a really important one here. So this is our equality, diversity and inclusion strategy. So Gareth, I will hand over to you again.
Thanks very much. So just this is as you highlight, we discussed this and have in staff governance committee as well, and it's been scrutinised in depth there, including earlier drafts and the process. So I wanted to highlight that we've gone through a really robust process development of the strategy over the course of the last year, and that's highlighted in the paper. I want to commend the team in terms of Gay, who led on it from a delegated perspective and strategic direction and leadership of that piece of work, working with Gail McRae, who is now in our equality, diversity and inclusion lead role for the organisation. There's a few things to sort of pick out. This is about strengthening our view and our approach to how we meet our obligations under the Equality Act, public sector equality duties, in relation to the employer aspects to that, and strengthening that. We've had a good track record in relation to the wider agenda and health inequalities and how people access our services in relation to the Equality Act, and that is, I'll cover that when we come on to the outcomes in terms of the backward look, in terms of what we've done over the last few years. This sets out then our outcomes again, which is a parallel paper here. You'll see we'll move on to that in due course. The strategy is the high level description of what we intend to do over the next 4 years. The outcomes are what impact is that going to have and how will we measure our progress against the strategy. And we probably, just to preempt some of the potential questions, anti-discrimination is built into our work plan and our approach, recognising there's an ask of all boards to consider anti-racism, but noting there's a number of aspects of the Equality Act that we need to consider in relation to preventing discrimination. So that is built into there in a more holistic approach, but it's not to say that we haven't taken heed of the request around anti-racism. And just to note that the outcomes, which again we'll come to, maybe view that's the next 4 years, but we also have a midpoint reporting, and that's the mainstreaming report. So again, that's how we measure things going forwards. So I'll stop there because I think just to highlight that it's substantial assurance on the process of developing the strategy, and it's ready for approval by the board and publication as our strategy for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Gareth. And yeah, as I was reading through this, because there's so much overlap between this and the next few items, and I've got sort of questions written down, and I wasn't sure which bit to put it in, but I suppose I want to start by saying really welcome this. I think this is a really significant step forward for us, but recognizing what you've said about, you know, that there's so much more work that comes after this and sits around this, and this is that really high level view of where we want to get to. I'll open up for questions and comments, please. Alex.
Yeah, just the kind of obvious question, Gareth, but with what's been in the news about NHS 5 and single-sex toilet spaces, changing rooms and all the rest of it, does this cover us?
I think the aspect of that's probably the detail that we need to pick up in conversations, and we need to take a watching brief in terms of what unfolds in relation to a current employment tribunal. So I think we should be thoughtful about what we discuss in board in advance of that. Just to note that there is further work to be done to develop guidance at a national level, which Scottish Government are leading on in relation to guidance around transitioning, that aspect of how we support our workforce in that space. So the strategy as a whole covers that aspect of the Equality Act. The detail that's coming out of how we manage that at a local level, I think, is for us to discuss as we see things unfold. We do have guidance at the moment in place for the organisation, which is very much around, I suppose, the ethos of equality, diversity and inclusion is that every single circumstance needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis, and we need to be very thoughtful how we handle that and how we manage it and how we support people to do that. It's a complex space, so I don't want to go too far on that in board today, but I'll maybe pause there.
Thanks, Gareth. I've got Steve and then Karen. Steve, I'll bring in.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Gareth. I know we went through this at staff governance, and I think it's a really good document. I'm just going to comment on priority one. Really pleased to see that, you know, the first point is integrated the equality impact assessments, and it's just to make the point that I think most organisations struggle with EIAs and can often be seen as almost an impediment to getting projects off the ground. But I just wanted to maybe understand how you're going to roll that sort of change in culture across the organisation if it's required, and think about, you know, equality impact assessments up front before we start to make major changes or try to deliver major projects. Because I think certainly a lot of the lessons that I've seen is that when you leave it until it's too late, it is definitely too late, and there are significant reputational and organisational challenges that can be fairly difficult financially as well if we don't get it right up front. Thanks.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I have actually passed on to Gail an approach we developed, or I developed when I was working with Golden Jubilee, and it has also been shared through the National Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Leads Network for NHS Scotland. I was very fortunate to work with a very talented individual who brought design skills, artistic skills to the role as well. So the key to that was really making it a very different approach in terms of how it looked and how it felt, and making it easier. So I can't sort of articulate it without sort of showing you the example. We found that actually really brought it to life, and if you can make it easier and simpler and bring it to life, you're more likely to get it completed. I think sometimes the pro formas that we use are a bit, for want of a better word, dry, and they're a bit difficult to interpret, I think. So we need to work out how best to present that. Certainly have done that previously and it worked well. So I'd like to look at bringing that approach to NHS Highland as a much easier way of interpreting how you go forwards with an equality impact assessment.
Okay, that's good. I would welcome that approach, Gareth. Karen, I'll bring you in next, please.
Thanks. Again, the strategy's really well written, really easy to understand, and hopefully as it's moved out and implemented within the organisation will be well accepted. My question is really one around the sort of what will the implementation be? How will this inform the development of training plans, or how will it influence how we recruit? All of those things. How will that is that the next step, Gareth? Is it about looking at all those domains and working out how this informs that approach? Because it is, if we take this as it is and implement that into our system, then it is a real cultural shift, and that's great, and I really welcome that. But it is a huge shift potentially, and it's how do you do that bit by bit? I suppose I've answered my own question there, but I really be interested to kind of hear what the kind of next iteration of this and how it kind of moves forward.
Yeah. So again, we're the detail of what the plan behind it. So the high level, the strategy describes at a high level what we're trying to achieve, and then we've got more detail sitting under that in relation to the outcomes. I think with all of these, it's a journey and it's progress. Some of these aspects are, I suppose, more tangible and you can set up and sort of make distinct, measurable. We've done that, but then seeing the outcome, the actual impact of it, is a little bit more challenging to demonstrate. So again, I think that applies to many of the areas we're looking at that are related to people. So health and well-being is another one where you'd say, you can point out the aspects of what we do to support our staff, but how can you prove a direct link to then health and well-being of our staff? So it's in that kind of vein. So I think it's trying to balance that not having any tangible measures, whilst also recognizing that some of these are also influenced by societal factors as well. So in the outcomes document, that goes into a little bit more detail, but we do have behind this, not necessarily the board level detail, but we will be scrutinising at the staff governance committee the action plans that go behind this.
Okay, that's good, thank you. And Jerry, please.
Thank you, Sarah. Very briefly, Steve picked up the point that I wanted to make, and I actually think the effective use of effective EQIAs, I think, is absolutely essential in this moving forward, because I would preface my comments by actually saying, from what I see coming to us at the board, it would appear to be poor at the moment. So I think we need to be looking at really a step change in terms of the EQIA. So I'm really pleased to hear that what Gareth's talking, because one of my questions was, well, how? So I think Gareth has begun to articulate that. So I'm really pleased and offer full support for that measure. Thank you.
Yeah, just to probably follow up on that, I think there's two other functions that are critical to successful implementation of EQA into our processes. One is actually within our governance. And I think the head of corporate governance role they've got coming in, I'll be wanting to see that to be a sort of QA process, if you like, making sure that we are actually, I suppose, catching when it's not coming through, and that kind of learning loop has to be in there to say, if it's coming to board, it has to have these things in place. So that's a kind of that has to be part of how we embed it and how we do stuff. And the other aspect, which is, I suppose, our strategic planning and our planning approach. As we embed that into, again, putting those two things are really substantial areas. If you get it right, it's built in from the beginning, as others have already said.
Thanks, Gareth. I think that's really helpful. Okay, yeah, excited about this. Looking forward to seeing it kind of mature and roll out. I think it'll be really interesting to come back to this, in due course and see see where we've been able to get some traction, and where we want to mature it further. Emily, I see you've got a question. I'll bring you in, please.
Thank you. I think it's probably too early, but I just had a question around the KPIs. They're all quite quantitative, but I presume there would be some qualitative information gathered as well to measure sort of how we're doing against these various priorities.
Oh, Gareth, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And the mainstreaming report is one of the areas where you'd look for case studies. I think my experience of doing this previously is that you've got to get the balance right. So it's case studies are helpful to illustrate it, but it's also good to have quantitative data, so you've got some sort of feel for tangible, measurable outputs as well. I was just going to pick up. There was something else. Sorry, it's gone from my mind. I was going to say something, but it's gone.
Well, that's okay. But actually, you've reminded me of something I was going to bring up under one of the papers. So obviously, in a little while, we're going to be looking at that mainstreaming report that you just referenced, which is the one that we're looking at. Obviously, covers 2021 to 2025. This strategy, we're hopefully going to approve that today, and that launches now. We've also got another report on equal pay, the pay gap. So there's something for me about, not yet, but going forward, how we kind of pull it all into something, so that when we're looking at the reporting, we see how it all packages up together. It's one of those situations, isn't it, where the timing is all a little bit off right now, but we'll be able to pull it in now that we're approving the strategy, that will kind of bundle it all up nicely as we go forward, because I think that'll be helpful.
Yeah, just on that point, there are what we can do is put together a table, if you like, that articulates the different reporting requirements, because some of them are statutory requirements that we need to do on an annual basis. Some of them are 2 yearly, so and they hopefully don't always naturally align. So, but I think so people understand from a perspective of the strategy, the outcomes of the 4-year process that we have to do every 4 years. The mainstream report is done 2 yearly, so you do it basically midpoint and endpoint, so it goes in that those are the two things that go together. The other things are more workforce orientated, workforce monitoring reports. There's a statutory timetable that you have to publish that information by, and there's a number of things we haven't necessarily mentioned today, but we could put that in as a separate reporting, as workforce monitoring report is another one that's a statutory requirement. So there's a number of things in there to take into account.
No, I think that exactly what you described is probably what I was looking for, because as I was reading through it, you can pick up how they all tie together, but there's something about, you know, kind of almost joining the dots so that you're not searching in one place when the answer is somewhere else. So I think that'll be something we can do going forward. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up there. So sorry, I've lost my place on here. So we are being asked today to approve this strategy for publication and take substantial assurance from that. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, good. And Gareth, just as you said at the top, a huge thank you to everybody that's worked on this. It's a really important step forward, and I know lots of people have contributed to it in lots of different ways. So I think it's important to thank them and for all of their work, and we look forward to seeing how this goes forward. Okay, colleagues, let's take a half an hour lunch break. We're a little behind schedule, but that's okay. And I'll see you back here at 1:10 past 1, please.